Hi, everybody. I appreciate SANS for having me. I appreciate everybody for your time, for being here to listen in. And here's what we put together for this year. For those of you that might follow me on LinkedIn or YouTube, you know that I focus on keeping things simple and practical. And that's hopefully what I'm highlighting in this presentation when we talk about the critical controls and looking at each of the 5 ICS critical controls that Rob and Tim had put together and look at in each one where people really don't take advantage, because they fall short. Might sound a little harsh, but I think there's a lot of opportunity that people are missing, that we're leaving out on the table, and where, yeah, we can do this for free, other than our own time. And I understand it's not completely free. I also put the asterisks in because in part, I saw Andy was on the schedule, and he actually has my favorite S4 talk of all time, where really he was getting into this, this kind of cycle that we're stuck in, where, and this is my version of Andy's talk, so where we're looking to AI to solve different crises that we have, like global warming. The demand for AI, of course, generates a significant demand for more energy, right? More energy, and yes, I mean, there's nuclear, there's clean, but even with SMRs or small modular reactors that are just really starting to become a reality, we're still gonna go to a lot of traditional power generation. So we're just kind of this ever-evolving cycle. So I would be remiss if I did not mention that there are costs associated with using tools like ChatGPT and other GenAI, just for consideration. With that said, I'm still going to use ChatGPT and other tools to help me do my job much more quickly and efficiently. Last year, I talked about how we can use ChatGPT to sit there, right? Tell ChatGPT, I have this idea for a little tool. Right? A lot of us probably get that idea that said, it'd be really cool if I had a little tool to do this or that. Like, hey, I have this PCAP. I want you to take out all of the IP addresses, the associated MAC addresses, right? Look up the associated vendor with those MAC addresses and almost like create a little asset registry for me. So I can use that whether for asset inventory, I can use it for investigations and so on. So it's great to be able to create these little tools. In that time, there's even a term for that where you sit and you talk with ChatGPT or GenAI and tell it what you want, and of course it does it. What's the term? Anybody know? Vibe coding. Yeah, exactly. Right? It's like, oh, there's actually a term for this now, which I thought was kind of funny. So it makes me think of my granddaughter because, oh, what are you up to? I'm just vibing. So I every time I heard the term, I just think of that. So. We have to realize, and this is another, I think, big miss for folks, is that they're not using ChatGPT or other GenAI tools today. The attackers are using it like crazy, right? We know they are. And I think a lot of people are probably afraid to. And I don't know who came up with this saying, but I saw it on LinkedIn, of all places, of course, and it said, you won't lose your job to GenAI, you're gonna lose your job to someone using GenAI, right? And that's very, very true. And so it's very contentious. And I think a lot of people are staying away from it. But I would encourage, if you haven't played with it yet or started to use it, definitely jump in, because it's definitely not going anywhere. And that's partly what Andy was talking about earlier, right? I think the cat's already out of the bag, the horse is out of the barn. We had a couple of other expressions we were talking about earlier. And GenAI is only exponentially getting better every day. But again, the attackers are always out there using it. So again, my idea was to go through, look at the 5 critical controls, hit each of these areas in like again, what I consider a big miss for each of these that environments aren't doing, that give you a huge benefit in securing ICS. And then, yeah, look at how we can address that with ChatGPT or insert your GenAI tool of choice. So, most important question I'm going to ask. Any fans of the British TV show Taskmaster by chance? Like none? Oh, you guys have to watch it. It's on on YouTube. It's a great show. They do, it's mostly comedians. They do silly tasks, but with a kind of an intellectual twist. It's a great show. I bring it up because one of the contestants had actually created a pop-up book about his experience on the show while being on the show. It was actually one of his tasks. And so you'll see there's a little bit of that inspiration in my presentation. So for the first one, we're going to talk about incident response. So with incident response, I think the document that Rob and Tim have put together does a really excellent job of highlighting incident response, really planning, I think, at a high level. And so you can see there's this great graphic. I really loved it. I wish there was actually more like this in the document. But you can see all the way like number 3, tabletops, right? So we still see a lot of organizations, at least small, medium-sized environments, still not doing tabletops yet. But number 1 is a big part for me, but it's really the bottom where it says, look to real world examples in your industry. I've always said the biggest problem that a lot of people have is they're just not paying attention to what's going on in their industry. And I always think of when we saw about 40% of the ports in Australia went down. And it was because all the systems that were used to control the movement of containers on and off ships and on and off trucks. Those systems sat on the IT network, right? IT burned down with ransomware, the port shut down. The kicker was the same thing happened to the port of Nagoya like 3.5, 4 months before that, right? If I'm running the ports in Australia, I more than likely would have known what the heck was going on at the largest port of Japan and be like, yeah, could that happen to us? Right? And if so, what can I do to prevent it from happening to us? But a lot of people aren't doing that. So I think, yes, you need to pay attention to the general OT IC landscape. I do a lot of those briefings, but when I get to the end of the briefing, I want to spend like 10, 15 minutes on what's particular to that individual site, right? So the sector, maybe we talk about geography, but the idea is we make it as close as possible and use realistic examples. I said, I think the port examples is great. I heard like Colonial Pipeline was not the first pipeline to ever go down and get hit with ransomware, right? So if we're watching the news, I call it like cheap or free cyber threat intelligence, right? Paying attention. So ChatGPT can help us with this, right? And so here's a prompt that we can put up to say, hey, I work in this industry, right? Go ahead and find recent examples, hopefully within the last couple of years, of incidents at plants or environments like I have. Tell me what happened. Give me all the details you have. Tell me what type of attack it is, et cetera, et cetera. But most importantly, tell me the lessons learned, right? And tell me the issues and how to fix them. And so we can take that information. I don't do a lot in water. I work in just about every sector there is. I just don't do a lot of water. Data centers, have water treatment plants. That's my water experience. And so I was like, oh, well, let's do water treatment. And one of the items, and yeah, Alapiqua and Oldsmar come up, but we talk about, there was actually a hit in San Francisco. One of the smaller utilities got hit, or the water treatment facility. And it was really interesting. The really cool thing with ChatGPT, since the last presentation I did last year, was, oh, yeah, it has internet access now, right? It goes out, it does live research for you. It gives you links to that research, which is great because we don't want to take ChatGPT 100% at its word, right? So it's not always going to be accurate. And I pulled up this article that had found, and the first thing, they're talking about the leading ICS OT expert that they had interviewed for this article. And the first thing that he was talking about was how it was important to protect personally identifiable information from being on the dark web. I was like, what does that have to do with OT ICS? So he started talking about network segmentation. So I'm like, oh, okay, you're getting me back. And then he started talking about deploying like zero trust solution, not just principles, but solutions into OT. And I'm like, okay, you lost me again. So double check the work. We never take ChatGPT 100% for what it is, but it's pretty darn close to where it needs to be. Again, it's great for getting these lessons learned and how can I protect my environment, right? And I don't have to sit there and watch the news and all the feeds every single day. I don't have to, pay for a cyber threat intel feed, because a big part of why I do what I do on LinkedIn and YouTube, the majority of OT and ICS environments out there, they don't have the money for those types of tools, right? And never will. It's just the truth, right? So defensible architecture. We always know that we're going to put what between IT and OT. Always put a firewall, right? And I hate this because we always say we're going to put a firewall between them because we're going to protect OT from what? Yeah, we're going to protect it from all the evil, nasty things that come from the IT network, which is true, right? But it also lends itself to this whole IT versus OT scenario that we get into a lot of times, which we're going to talk about. For now, though, when we're talking about secure network architecture, I think there's a big miss, and there's really two in one that we're going to talk about, because firewalls, right? How many of us, you don't have to admit, but have seen firewalls or other, even sometimes network infrastructure like routers and switches that, they're not configured securely, right? We have the permit IP any, right? I think Patrick mentioned seeing a firewall that had 17 permit IP any's in it, which is crazy, right? So we know they're not secure. So instead of firewalls, I think of dumpster fires or dumpster firewalls that we see a lot. So we have bad ACLs, or we see administrative interfaces that are connected to the OT or the IT network, which gets a little scary. So again, I think there's two big misses. A lot of environments, they're not reviewing their ACLs. But also, and this kind of jumps into the next control when we're talking about network security monitoring, right? The majority of OT environments don't monitor their network. They can't afford to. And without jumping too far ahead, right? I think one of the big misses in environments, they're just not watching what's going on with the firewall, right? What's passing through the firewall, and not only what's allowed through the firewall, what's being blocked by the firewall. I've actually been in environments where I found state adversaries and other garbage attacks on the network just by watching not only what's allowed, but what's actually being blocked, right? So again, nobody's watching the firewalls. Now, again, more mature organizations, right? We're pumping all that data to a SIM. Great, the SIM's doing the correlation and generating alerts for us. In a smaller, medium-sized organization, right, we have this data more than likely, but again, nobody's watching it. I'm the type of person, I could sit here all day long and look at a log and I'm very happy, right? I'm one of those individuals, right? But I understand we can make mistakes, we can miss things, and you can only do it so long. So that's why we like tools like SIM. But again, a lot of organizations, most OT, ICS environments, they won't be able to afford those tools. So we can go to ChatGPT, or in this case, I decided, let's do Gemini. So we'll do Google's version and say, hey, I'm going to give you a Cisco firewall. Of course, we're only going to upload information that we don't consider confidential or sensitive, right? I'm going to say, strip out some information from this report. And I also want you to highlight, right, what traffic is being allowed through the firewall and what traffic is being denied. And then I also want you to do it, with the direction listed, right? IT to OT, OT to IT, right? Because it's important. We'll look at a couple of examples. And then most importantly, the last two are I really like, because I say, hey, if you see anything on the OT network talking with any public IP address, yeah, I probably want to know about that. And then ChatGPT is really cool because it can put stuff in a Word doc for you now, which is really cool. If you tell Gemini to do it, it just says, oh yeah, just copy and paste. I was like, okay, thanks, all right? So one win for ChatGPT. But here's an example where we see, okay, so what are we looking for? So we see, in this case, this is traffic from OT to IT. The number one protocol we see is TCP 1433 for SQL Server, which more than likely, if that's legitimate traffic, what is it being used for? Yeah, historians, right? So we have historians on the OT network, probably forwarding that data to the IT side, to the business, right? For business decisions. And so like, okay, we can check to make sure, yeah, that's legit. We'll double check. And we would also want to check things like IP addresses, where it's going to and coming from, where SSH, HTTP, are those legit? I don't know. We better double check. Right? So it's a great way to double check, are our ACLs set up appropriately? What about denied traffic? Again, I think this is the big one that people aren't looking. They might be watching the allowed traffic, but never watching the denied traffic, which is surprising. Because if I see like something, in this case, IT to OT, right? And I see SSH, like, what the heck is that? And maybe it's not an attacker, probably isn't an attacker, but maybe it's actually a legitimate business process that they expect to work, but it's not. So we need to actually fix that. Not that I want traffic going from IT into OT, but in a lot of environments, we can't get away with it. Of course, I was only using this for a few minutes, the free version that you're not logged into, and boom, it timed out. So I was like, okay. So I was like, oh, everybody's using Claude these days. So I'm like, I'll try Claude. And you pull up the page and then it says privacy first AI that helps you create in confidence. I'm like, this is awesome. It's like, wait a minute. It forces you to register and log in when it says privacy first. So I was like, kind of ironic in a bad way. I was like, okay, never mind. I'll go back to ChatGPT. So here is a ChatGPT chart, right? A little different. And so it's like, here's the top denied protocols, like the top 10 ports. And you see port 1, 689, 676, 677, 678, 679, 680. Right? If this was an attack, what type of attack would it be? More than likely. Yeah, it's just port scan, right? So yeah, if there's a port scan going on in the environment, yeah, we want to know about it. Now, half the time it seems that I see these days, it's like a technician that, he just found out about, or she just found out about Nmap, right? And they started to install it on a machine and they're doing a scan. Obviously not good, right? And it's, more than likely not an attacker, but it could be, right? We have to do the investigation. We don't have an investigation if we're not looking at the data in the first place. So again, a lot of environments can't afford those tools. Here's an example where it comes back and says, yeah, we actually found this device on the OT network talking out to the internet over SSH. Like a reverse shell connection or what, right? We don't know. Right? Dragos did a really great job highlighting this in the year in review report this year, where there were like 40% of the environments that they were looking at had active outbound sessions to the internet. That's really extremely concerning. Network visibility monitoring. That's kind of my favorite one. Actually, I like the rich. So I touched on this a little bit. I think it was about a year and a half or 2 years ago where Rob actually started to highlight the fact that less than 5% of organizations, OT organizations, are doing network security monitoring. And I would say even probably half of those are not doing a very good job. Okay. But we know there's a lot of environments that just aren't looking to see, right? The only way they're going to find out there's an attacker in the environment is when it's too late. So, why aren't they looking? And these days, it's not necessarily because they don't know that it's something that they should be doing. It's, man, they just don't have the resources. So what can we do that's simple, cheap, and practical? So when we talk about network security monitoring, what can I put on the network that gives us 100% fidelity? If you're not familiar with the term, 100% fidelity means, hey, if I have this system and it gets hit, I have an attacker in the environment, period, the end, and I need to respond. What type of system are we talking about? Honeypot, yeah, exactly. So I've actually had a lot of fun. I have even more fun when like the OT honeypot sales folks like reach out to me on LinkedIn. I was like, yeah, no, thanks, but no thanks. Because, and no offense to them, right? But we can just create a free, simple OT honeypot with ChatGPT. I don't have to spend tens of thousands of dollars. Now, if you're creating different tools in ChatGPT, it's usually easier to do it like step by step. Tell it to do one thing, test it to make sure it works, and then do it again. And we'll see another example. But you see, hey, create a listener on 502, and then, hey, tell me if I'm going to get pinged, and hey, if I get a send packet, and I send a SYNAC back, but the three-way handshake never completes, then more than likely, yeah, we just got port scanned. So let me know. And this is what it looks like, right? Here's my for ping request, right, from a Windows machine. And then, yeah, we just got port scanned. But we can take it to the next level because then we can say, hey, add a Modbus listener so this thing actually looks like a PLC sitting on the network. And have some fake coils and registers. In this case, it actually gives you just random garbage. So if the attacker actually has like a little knowledge, they'll realize what this is. It doesn't matter, it's too late because as soon as they hit this thing and they say, I want to read your coils, like show me the first 10 coils, right? Or show me the first 10 registers. Those are some crazy numbers, right? Or if somebody's trying to write to the PLC, we know, ding, 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 right? There's an attacker in the environment, period, the end. Again, what did it cost? Like 15 minutes to put it together. So secure remote access, this is one that I also had fun with. And so I started to wonder, I'm like, what can I do? And I actually had an idea, we'll talk about it in a second. But I was like, you know what, just to see what ChatGPT would say, hey, I'm doing this presentation. Like, and I want to talk about how we further secure remote access. And I actually came up with all these ideas, which I thought were great. Right? So it's a great tool, even just for getting ideas and bouncing back and forth. To me, the biggest miss in remote access these days, because almost everybody knows now to use multi-factor, right? So we have MFA pretty much everywhere. So that's great to see. But I'm a big fan of just-in-time access. If you have an outside party coming into your environment, right, do you really want or need to give them 24/7, 365 unrestricted access? No, right? So don't give it to them. So we want to enforce just-in-time access. If I have a vendor, an integrator, an outside party that needs to come in, right? They're going to do maintenance, they need to troubleshoot an issue, maybe do an upgrade, then okay, we'll give you a window and you have that 2 hour, that 4 hour, whatever it is. I always assume their system, that consultant that has that laptop at their home or at their office, that it's going to get compromised one day. And once it's compromised, again, do we really want that attacker to have 24/7, 365 access into the environment? No. So it came back and said, ChatGPT, there were two things I asked it. One, I said, I wanted to create a cool name for this application. So it came up with the justified user interface for controlled entry, or JUICE. I'm like, okay, we'll roll with it. The other ones were really bad. This was the only one that was halfway decent. I said, we're gonna create a web application. Because I think a big part of just enabling just-in-time access is just having a platform to do approvals and denials of requests. And so this is where, and I did a little bit of this last year, where it was, hey, I can create a web application. I am not a developer. I just don't have the patience. I used to pretend to be a developer many years ago. I just don't have the patience, right? And so I said, hey, create this tool that's gonna allow me to create requests and approve them and deny them. And this is what we got. Like, it kind of looks like it functions. It doesn't look nice, but hey, I'll take it. I'm like, you forgot to tell me what the login credentials are. So it's like, okay, here are the admin credentials. And then here's what you get when you log in. Like, yeah, that's not gonna work. So let's try this some more, right? I need the ability to go in, create requests, view requests so I can approve or deny them. And I actually didn't ask, this is where it starts to get really interesting with ChatGPT. I didn't ask it for a change password feature. It just said, hey, you know what? I think you need this, which is kind of interesting. And what we've seen is that now, as you start doing prompts, it comes back with suggestions and says, oh, by the way, do you want me to create a little favicon, right? The little icon that goes up in the title bar of the browser, or a style layout. I want a style layout, right? That looks like crap, to use a technical term. Sorry. Do you need animations, multi-factor login, password reset, right? Dark mode, charts, email notifications, request log. Do you want me to put it in Docker for you? Those are all great features. They even say OT theme login slogans. So of course, right, I had to do style layout. Again, we don't want it to look so bad. And of course, OT theme login slogan. Because I'm like, what is it going to do? And this is actually what it did. So it actually makes a much nicer page. I added the graphic. And it's actually like Metasploit, right? If you've ever run Metasploit, right, it comes up with a different slogan every time. So you can see like secure access, justified entry because downtime isn't an option. Or remote doesn't mean reckless, juice means control. That's actually not bad. The last, I have no idea what, because an open port is an open door. Juice it right. I almost didn't even put that one in. But you know, so I think it had like 20 different ones that it put in. So yeah, thanks ChatGPT. So, but you can continue to sit there. You literally could just sit there and use the suggestions, right? It understands where you want to go, maybe even better than you yourself do. Because right, it's the collected, knowledge of humankind essentially. And so then eventually you can see, within 15 minutes, it's, oh, I got dark mode working, right? Or it did, right? Here's the user registration page. Here's the approve, like the request submission page. Here's what it looks like when you go to either approve or reject or deny a request. There might be a version that if you get approved, there's a picture of Rob smiling. And if you get denied, he's frowning. So that might exist somewhere. So the last one we're going to talk about is vulnerability management. And in the document that Tim and Rob put together, they actually included Homeland Security's the patch urgency decision tree to try to figure out, right, are we going to patch now, next, or never? And I was like, oh, I can put this in a web page and I would make a few changes and we can get input, because my biggest problem, and I was like, well, two, is we just talked about creating a web interface, even if you're not a web developer like me. But also it's, my big problem with these types of discussions, and this goes for risk assessments and other types of ICS or OT related discussions also, is do we have the right people in the room? I come from an IT cybersecurity background. I just happen to work at one of the world's largest engineering companies with some of the greatest engineering minds, period, right? I'm not the one going into an environment to talk about whether we're going to address a vulnerability or not, right? I'm not going to go in and just do a risk assessment by myself. We have to make sure we have all the right people in the room. The problem is this gets down to the IT OT problem that I touched on a little bit earlier today. Right? It's not a technical problem. There's no silver bullet. It's a people problem, right? At the end of the day. So my girlfriend, my partner, she's a therapist. And so it does remind me of a bad relationship, right? When IT and OT aren't talking with each other, or if they're at each other's throats, which I still see today, right? Nothing's getting done and the environments go unprotected. I was having dinner with somebody that actually also mentioned, oh, IT and OT is a lot like Star Wars fans and Star Trek fans. I was like, oh my God, I feel like you're right. I'm like, that was totally it. And so in this case, and this is a nice thing just to highlight, I'm going to ask ChatGPT to actually act as a therapist. I'm not even going to talk about IT and OT. I'm just going to say, hey, talk about, hey, how do I get Star Wars fans and Star Trek fans to work well together? Right? And so it brings this a little documentation, again, that ChatGPT will do. It gives you all these steps. I'm a big proponent for things like psychological safety, which Charles Duhigg had highlighted in his Power of Habit book. And that was like one of the keys to Google success, right? People need to feel safe where they can ask questions without being judged. Because at least I know I don't want to ask a question if I'm going to feel stupid, right? So how do we address those types of issues? So then ChatGPT at the very end, it came up with a little slogan for in a galaxy far, far away and just beyond the final frontier piece as possible. So I was like, thanks, ChatGPT. So it tried. I'll give it credit, right? So ultimately, though, if we work together, right, the attackers lose, at least for that one point in time, right, in that one environment. But we have a lot of environments out there, and there's always tomorrow and the next day. So that's why we're all here. So special thanks to everybody at SANS, especially Tim, Rob for spearheading this, and the rest of the team, all the folks behind the scenes that make it happen. I really appreciate it and the time to be able to come. And thanks for everybody for the time and attention. Thank you.